Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Huber. Today is episode number 107. I'm joined by the usual lineup, the usual suspects, John Doyle and Logan Whitmer, here to tackle some tough woodworking issues, or not. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I want to say that this episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is presented by Epilogue Laser. Quickly and easily customize your woodworking projects for added beauty and value. Learn more at epiloguelaser.com.
Why do we always have to tackle the tough woodworking issues? Why can't you throw us a few softballs?
Yeah,
you know?
that'd be nice.
Right. Maybe they'll come.
Yeah.
We'll get started today with a couple of comments from last episode, which had Brent Hall on it. Don says, very interesting, very informative, very educational. Brent was fascinating to listen to. I enjoyed this edition enormously. Thanks. And then Chuck writes, I subscribe to Brent's YouTube channel as well and Woodsmith Magazine TV show. I would love to see a yearly partnership between you two on a Raise the Bar historic piece. As a hobbyist, cost time is an option for an heirloom piece. Maybe like a 1890s entrance table, a china cabinet, or a bedroom suite for a few ideas.
My dyslexia just heard that as a 1980s.
There you go.
And I just saw so much golden oak flash in front of my eyes.
I was thinking maybe some that printed particle board.
Yes.
You
Sure.
know, if you can find that. I don't know where you get that at. But
One of the things that I would like to talk about today is settings in your settings or machines or things you just don't mess with in your woodworking shop. For example, I saw a recent, don't remember where I saw it, project on, I know where it was, because I'm working on that hand plane, that wood jack plane, and in the photos that go with Popwood's article on it, Dylan is drilling out the waste for the blade and the mouth and whatever. And he's got the drill press table rotated to 45 degrees. And I'm like, I ain't never touching that on my drill press table.
Yeah.
And you might as well just weld it at 90.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And to be fair, and I am so bad at this. I just take for granted if in the shop here, if I walk up to the miter saw, it's set at 90 degrees. I take for granted if I walk up to a drill press, it's at 90 degrees. I take for granted, meaning it is not always. And at some point will figure out during my process that, oh shoot, that was set at like 83 degrees to make an end for a chair leg or something. Yeah. But you're right. There are particular things in your shop that you can do and just don't mess with. And that's one of them. Put a piece of, 1/4-inch rod in your drill press chuck, grab a square, set that thing in 90, and like you said, weld that SOB in place and never move it.
Because I was... because I saw that in that article, and then I saw another project, probably in one of the other woodworking magazines, where the author had tilted their drill press table, and I don't know, that's just like crossing the streams, man. It just does not seem like it's going to end
I'd
well.
rather make some sort of ramp or jig or something to do it at an angle rather than move it out of 90 degrees, but... Which would make for an interesting April Fool's joke, is to like go and change all the tools' angles by like 1 or 2 degrees. Nobody would see it coming until they're all done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which kind of happened a few weeks ago when we were doing our clock episode. And I was trying to fit some pieces. And Logan, your segment, I think, was just before mine. And your clock has sides that slope in.
They're splayed by like 3 degrees.
3 degrees or whatever. So you had... So in the main shop, the other table saw and the dado saw were set up for other cuts and had the don't move this on penalty of losing a limb. So we had just one table saw to do these cuts on. And you had used it just before me to cut your pieces to length. So it's got the parallel end bevels or miters or however you want to say it. And I just needed to cut something to length. And I think thankfully it was just like a piece of hardboard or something like that. So I go up, make the cut, flip it around, set up my stop block, make another cut. And then I go walking away. And as I'm walking away, it just like something just felt weird about it.
Yeah.
And I look at it and it was off. And I was, oh, son of a.
Well, and that's completely on me. Not like that's what I was going to say. In your shop, like in your personal shop, in our personal shops, that's on you. Like you do that, you do it. Here, where you're trying to work with other people, like I didn't think twice about it because I'm thinking, okay, I need to get back to the set to do whatever we're doing.
Yep.
And yeah, I should have reset it back to 0.
And I'm sure I've done it to other people too.
And everybody does it at some point. It's like you set up something or you adjust the stop block that somebody actually wasn't done with. It's like, oh man, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think there's also something you said. Like it's funny. So over this weekend, we were selling some machinery here that we just don't really use anymore, which is super cool. Had some people come through that are magazine fans, TV show fans and stuff. Had bought a couple of pieces of equipment we had, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, this huge shop is great! Like this has to be so nice to work," and it is. But on the flip side, you have so many people in the shop. The machinery gets used so much more than it would like in our personal shops. That some things start to lose some tolerance because they've been used so much. You know what I mean? They start to get a little play here and there. And it's like in my shop, I would not be using it near as much as we do here. So it would stay tight. It would stay tighter for longer. I could calibrate it, and I know it's not going to get adjusted for some weird, design that Chris Fitch came up with that we need to make all these adjustments to make this cut or whatever. So it's an interesting parallelism that's like,
yeah,
it's nice, but at the same time, it's like you lose a little bit of that control that you have in your own shop.
And I think with that, the shop guys usually lose a little bit of their tolerance as well. With us coming in there and screwing around with stuff.
I can see your face as I was saying it. It's like John's got
it's like a slow burn. Just like, here it comes. Yeah. But you can't get out of the way. It's like deer in the headlights.
Yep.
Yeah. You're stuck.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's I noticed the same thing. What was I doing earlier this week? Oh, or it was last week. Or were we Tuesday? Yeah. Well, it was last week. I was spraying those stupid wicker chairs my wife said she wanted. And I noticed it in the finish room too, where it's like, if it was somebody's personal gun, like they would clean it a lot better than it gets cleaned here. It's like, oh, it's that spray gun. It's good enough. It might be stained a little blue the next time somebody uses it or whatever.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
It's always the next guy's problem.
Yeah.
Until it comes,
which might be future self.
Yeah, it comes back around, and that's how it always works out with the panel sander for me. It's like, oh, that's somebody else's problem, and then it usually comes back to me. I'm the one changing the paper. So.
Yep.
But, yeah. I guess another.
No, it is.
I was going to say another thing that you were saying. A setup that you never change is if you have a dovetail jig, is just invest in a router that goes with the dovetail jig, and it's always set up because you could spend a whole day setting those things up.
Yeah. Well, and that's like one of the main reasons that I just got the stupid things by hand. They don't look they don't ever look as clean as a jig does. And it takes longer, and by the end of the day, I got dovetail back where I'm like hunched over just from chopping waste. I just can't stand setting those stupid things up. But you're right. If you had one, you had it set up, and you just leave a router with it, perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which I think is what we had for the longest time around here when we would do dovetail drawers. It would just be like, don't mess with the jig, and don't mess with the router that goes with the jig.
Yep. Sure.
I was also thinking another one is probably two of them. One related to the drill press, because I was teaching a class for the Des Moines woodworkers, and we were talking about drill press speeds and stuff. And a couple of guys were like, I don't know the last time that I changed the speed on my drill press.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on when you bought a drill press and what kind of drill press it is. Like if you have one like ours in the shop has a lever, you just pull the lever while it's running and you can
it's that
go
Reeves
from
drive or whatever.
Yeah, which is super handy because I found that, like brad point bits, just dial it way up, just 1,500, 2,000 RPM, something like that, and it's going to drill a much better hole, even on some Forstner bits. But that can still come to bite you too because, I know that I had the drill press set up for, I think, like 2,000 RPM for drilling pilot holes for screws, and then I needed to use the wing cutter for like a 3-inch hole for that dust collector thing that I was working on. A wing cutter at 2,000 RPMs is a totally different animal than a wing cutter at 500 RPMs.
Yeah, I have.
And you only do that. You only do that once.
Right. My drill press is the one that you have to change the belts, which isn't that big a deal, but it's like I'm just making one cut here with the wing cutter. I'm just gonna wing it, as they say, and see what happens. Don't keep my knuckles out of the way. And
and that was always something I was like, okay, how much does it really matter? And then once I started turning, I'm like, it all has to do with the outside edge speed. It has nothing to do with like the RPM is irrelevant. Basically, it all has to do with how fast the outside edge of that cutter is moving. So I make a conscious effort now to correctly set the speed based on the bit size. But like in my shop, generally, I have one of our old Delta drill presses from the photo studio. She's been ridden hard, but she still works good. I think I have it set at like 1,200 RPM, and that's like a good covers most of. It's not too sketchy in either direction,
Right. Yeah. That's probably not a bad option to do if you have a drill press like that.
Yeah.
Because my drill press is the same way. I think it's as old as I am. And it's not hard to do, which is kind of funny to me because as woodworkers, we're already taking the next step in terms of building furniture ourselves and kind of doing things the hard way. But yet we won't take that step to change the belts on a drill press, which in reality takes 15 seconds to do. It's not that hard in the grand scheme of building a project. But
my problem I always have, and not so much with this Delta one, before I had the Delta, I had a cheaper drill press. And my problem was always, I never could remember which way the levers went to move the motors and stuff. So it was always 5 minutes of loosening wing nuts and wing bolts and stuff and jiggling the lever till it finally broke free. And but
of course mine is one that has just 2 belts. I know that there's some drill presses that have a 3rd belt in there, which then turns it into a lot more math than I really want to.
So with our drill press that we have with the lever and you can change the speed on the fly, do you look up the bit diameter and what speed it's supposed to be, or you just kind of eyeball it and that's kind of fast or that's kind of slow and that's about right?
I totally eyeball it.
Yep. In my opinion, if it's a brad point bit, which standard sets of brad point bits probably go up to 1/2 inch, right? Maybe a little bigger. But I think 1/2 inch and down on a brad point bit, you can go as fast as you want.
Right.
I don't think you can go too fast with a brad point bit.
And I remember reading somewhere years ago that, brad point bits were developed for commercial manufacturing on line boring tools.
Yeah.
So they were running those at 3,000 RPM. So speed it up.
Yep.
And it's going to make a much better hole.
Yeah. Now I have discovered with a sharp Forstner bit, slower is generally better. I mean, with the...
I was going to say the exact opposite.
Were you? See, I did... the last time I changed the speed on a drill press was for that outdoor kitchen I did. I made a recess for the charcoal bin, and I defined the hole, the corners with... it was the biggest Forstner bit I could find in our shop. It was 2.5 inches.
Oh, okay.
So it's
I see that.
I sharpened it a little bit, put it in there, and I dialed that thing down to 400, 500 RPM, and that thing would it just hogged out the holes nice and clean. It was beautiful. So
I can see it that way, but I was thinking if it's probably probably like 1.25 inches and less, I'll buzz those at probably around 1,500
for sure
RPM.
Yeah,
because I feel like then it's like Cookie Monster. There's just shaving spraying all over the place instead of jamming up. And
yeah. So here's the real question, though: does anybody use standard twist bits if they hate themselves?
If that's all I can find.
Right. Like if you need an oddball size, probably.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
But then I usually just keep those in the stay dull drawer in the drill press.
The self-sharpening drawer.
Yeah.
Yep. So I was working on this watchmakers cabinet, and I used a standard twist bit for doing something on it, and I'm like, this is stupid. Why do we have a twist bit? It's probably Chris was probably like drilling, titanium with it or something. But
no. Then the other one that I was thinking of is several of the bandsaws that we have around have a rip fence that has an option for tall pieces, and then you can slide it off and rotate it 90 degrees for narrow pieces that are cut real close to the blade, so you can have the blade guides lowered. And I know they try and make them as easy as possible to switch over.
They're stupid.
They're just not. I end up leaving it in the tall setting, so I'm ripping like 1/4 inch wide, 3/4 inch wide strips in 1/4 inch plywood. But in order to have the fence that close, the blade guides are like
I know
6 inches off the.
See, and I feel like I have ran into that issue more on the Rikon bandsaw on our set than I have on the Powermatic.
Okay.
Because the Rikon bandsaw, generally we have a narrower blade on.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's more opportunity there for blade deflection.
Yeah.
And while we're on bandsaws, don't ever freaking touch my bearings on that. Once it's set up, leave it alone. Don't feel like you're helping because you're not. But on the big Powermatic in the shop, that one, I'm okay getting that fence pretty close with the guides pretty high. Because it's a pretty stiff blade. Now, there's the safety issue with keeping a lot of the blade exposed, but I feel like that's a wider blade. That's probably 1.25 inch blade or 1 inch blade at least. I don't feel like you get as much deflection there.
Right.
The Rikon is the one I find myself flipping that fence occasionally. I like the style fence that Rikon has because it has a skew adjustment knob and some cams and stuff. I like the style, but it is very finicky. If it was in my shop, I'd just set it up and leave it. Mm-hmm. Where we're always flipping it back and forth. So
yeah.
Speaking of our bandsaws, do you guys ever change the blade, like the blade for width, or you just go find one of our bandsaws that has the right blade width in it? That's how I usually am. It's like, I need a little blade or a big blade, and
in my shop,
that's usually how it is.
Yeah, but around here, it's like I got to make one cut. I'm just gonna
like
go with it, or I'm gonna find one of the bandsaws that has the right blade in it.
I always know that the Laguna bandsaw in the shop has like a 1/2 tooth per inch blade on it. Mm-hmm. It's the wide curve bandsaw blade, basically.
Right.
It has a ton
but
of
it's a narrow blade, though.
Yeah, it's like
so it's like a 1/4 inch or a 3/16 blade with like a 1/2 tooth per inch.
Yeah, exactly. And it has a pretty wide set on it, which actually makes it really nice for cutting curves. It doesn't leave a very smooth cut because it's such a coarse blade. But, no, in my shop, I have my blades hanging right on the wall next to it, and I will always adjust. I will always change a blade out, depending on what I'm doing. Right. I have a resaw blade. I have a wider, like standard, just like 3/4 inch blade, and then I also have a 1/4 inch blade. So I do in my shop.
Mm-hmm.
I do not. I have a 1/2 inch wood slicer on my bandsaw. Always.
Yeah, I was gonna say I still only have the 3/8 inch blade that my bandsaw came with, and just rolling with it,
Yeah.
Till I need something else.
Here's my thought on that. Like, if your saw is set up correctly, you should be able to cut as straight a line with a 1/2 inch blade or a 3/4 inch blade as you can a 1/4 inch blade. Because the way the teeth work, the front tooth is creating a curve wide enough for the blade to slide through. So all you are doing is adding extra spine to the blade.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
I think resawing is a little different because you get a little bit of that deflection. But like if you're just like ripping parts to width, I think you do that with anything.
Yeah. Or
That's
cutting tight curves.
Yes.
Don't go with the
Yeah.
3/4 inch blade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you're Chris Fitch.
And see, I think it's my my style of work just doesn't usually have super tight curves in it. So the times where I need it to be just aren't there. And then I can kind of cheat it, by making relief cuts and and then I'll just go to hand tools to refine it anyway, or a spindle sander or something like that.
Yeah. What are you guys' thoughts on, just completely off topic, but like what are you guys' thoughts on those ceramic guides like the Laguna has versus like bearings?
I feel like our Laguna bandsaw in the shop is one of the earlier designs on it, and I'm not sure how well it's been cared for, so I feel like I can't judge it. But the one, based on that experience, I'm not a huge fan.
Okay.
But I know there's a lot of people that swear by those kind of guides
know.
without having either blocks or bearings on it or something.
Yeah. Like one of our former editors, Bob Kemp, he loved those ceramic bearings.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what my bandsaw mill has is ceramic bearings.
Oh, okay.
Ceramic blade guides.
Yeah.
I so much prefer ball bearings. Now, on the sawmill standpoint, the ball bearing guides for a blade are extremely loud. I was cutting next to my buddy Bobby on his Woodmiser, which has bearings. His saw's twice as loud as mine, and it's all because of the bearings, because that bearing's always contacting, so it's sitting there spinning.
Yeah.
But I feel like they're so much more finicky to adjust. Bandsaw bearings in general, bandsaw guides in general are finicky to adjust.
Yeah.
But I have a weird thing about the ceramic guides.
Yeah.
Are those just supposed to last longer, or the ceramic ones, or?
I think they're supposed to be cooler. They're supposed to be easier on the blade, I think.
Yeah.
In reality, if everything's running perfectly, the guides, either a ball bearing or a ceramic, doesn't touch the blade ever until it needs to bump it back into adjustment. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's probably tomato. It's just I feel like the ceramics are a little harder to adjust.
Yeah, I can see that.
And especially when you get into like a narrow, like the blade on our Laguna here is very narrow. It's 1/4 inch probably. So you got like 1/4 inch blade. You got like an 1/8 inch tooth and an 1/8 inch spine on it. So you don't have a whole lot. And if you're trying to back out of a curve, it snaps out of the bearing grasp. So I don't know. Just kind of one of those things I thought about.
Special thanks to Epilogue Laser, sponsors of this episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. You can quickly and easily customize your woodworking projects for added beauty and value. Learn more at epiloguelaser.com. I will say I do like the bandsaws that have the thrust bearing behind the blade, where when the blade contacts that bearing, that the bearing is in that same line, as opposed to 90 degrees to it, which never really made sense to me.
Yeah, where it's I get what you're saying.
Where it ends up, the blade ends up riding on the face of the bearing race or whatever. That just doesn't seem. Feels like somebody misread the drawings.
Yeah. Yep. I've been thinking about, because I would like to get a second set of ceramics just to have with the bandsaw mill stuff in case I'm out somewhere, catch something, it breaks a guide or whatever. God, they're so expensive. I think it's like $280 for me to replace or to have an extra set on me.
Oh yikes!
And I'm like, I can find the thrust bearings because those are just like 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch thrust bearings. They're like standard bandsaw size. So I can buy Delta ones or Laguna ones and just put them on a bandsaw. But the top and bottom ones are like 7/8 inch diameter cylinders by 1 inch long.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, God, they're so expensive, and I can't find them anywhere. And I'm like, I wonder if I could just find some like lignum vitae and make some lignum ones. You know what I mean? Like,
you could
just as a backup.
Well, I had that. I mean, it's totally different scale, but I had that Craftsman 12-inch bandsaw, And the blocks that because I bought it from a coworker, and I think the blocks were missing or cracked or something like that. And they were an oddball size. I think they were like 3/8 because it's Craftsman, so they can't use standard sizing back then anyway. So I just ended up milling a couple of pieces of hard maple and used those as blocks, top and bottom. And then those, I had them not like pinching the blade, but against the blade.
Yep. And
I had heard people, like that scores the blade or it scorches on the wood. Never had a problem with scorching or anything.
Yeah.
And they worked just fine for all kinds of stuff. And I did resawing and a lot of curve cuts on that one. And so yeah, I would think lignum vitae would be perfect for that.
Yeah, I mean, like I could buy some like Argentinian lignum vitae. I could buy a dowel that size, and it's like
right.
You just have to
or a turning blank, like a pen blank of it.
Yeah, it'd be perfect. So
yeah, that would be your backup. That's what I would do.
Yep, that's kind of what I'm thinking. But the other saw that I think in my shop I've never adjusted and I never plan to adjust it, and it's bitten me here before, is I never changed my jigsaw base from 90. Like, you know what I mean? Like I know people that will cut bevels with them or whatever. I know a lot of guys that do like resin casting will cut bevels for some relief to demold and stuff. It's like I've had it happen here where it's like I was cutting something, I'm like, this does not look right, and I see the base is like tilted like 85 degrees, and I'm like, who did it?
And that's why.
Who done it?
Nope. That's probably one tool that I feel like I'm just not connecting with is a handheld jigsaw. Because I cut bevels with it without even trying, and the base is set at 90.
It's like, how did I do that? How did I get the blade to do that? To bend like that?
Well, I'll tell you. I will tell you. I had the same thing until a couple of years ago. I made those stupid dinosaur heads, and I did all those with the jigsaw.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was just like an afternoon of standing there jigsawing out dinosaur head parts. And I realized with a sharp blade, I went and bought a new pack of blades for the Bosch jigsaw here. I bought a new pack of blades for it. With a sharp, stout blade, that thing will split a pencil line. I thought I was...
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, one of those... probably not going to make a finish... I mean, I'm never going to make a finished cut with it, but probably never going to do heavy shaping with it. But something like that, it was perfect. So...
Yeah, and I'm sure that it has a lot to do with just practice and experience with it. But it feels like every time I try and do it, because like to make a curved cut or something, like the top of it, I'm like, hey, I'm doing a pretty good job here. And then you look at the bottom and I'm like off of a half an inch or something like that. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, call it what it is. Generally, I'm using it as like a roughing tool. So you rough out an opening and you come back with a flush trim bit or something.
Right. Yeah, but it feels like I should be able to go from like 2 hours of cleanup work to probably just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So have you done any sawmilling lately? I haven't heard you talk about it recently.
I've been on vacation, John. No, I have not.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
I have some stuff at my house to cut. It's been, so cold, and we just had a tornado rip through here, which I could drive right down the road and pick up a lot of trees right now. I was eyeballing a couple nice oaks on my way into work this morning that were piled up against somebody's driveway. But no, I have not. I need to. I'm getting the itch. I got a couple of guys that have been asking me to. I have a couple of logs at my house for clients that I need to get cut at some point. It's just I don't like doing it in the snow.
Yeah.
Everything's slippery, everything's wet, everything's sloppy. I don't like moving the sawmill in winter because it gets covered in salt and sand. So,
I can see that. Yeah.
With the recent storms, were there trees down by you, or more branches? Full trees?
Yeah. No, they're full trees. There was a bunch of trees that were completely uprooted. Which this was, I don't know. So anybody that didn't hear, I would just had a big tornado go through. It was about 70 miles. The tornado lasted for 70 miles, so it went through a lot of towns. Went about 400 or 500 yards from my house, thankfully. Not a branch out of place at my on my property. But 400 yards down the road, there's trees and houses destroyed. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what those trees are like versus the derecho trees, where the derecho was a lot of just like buffering winds that just kept going, where the tornado was fast. I mean, it moved at like 50 some miles an hour. So it grabbed them and pulled them out. So I'm going to be interested to see if we have any of the wind shake that we had with the derecho trees, because like Phil saw on that fir, sometimes you start cutting some of that fir and all of a sudden there's cracks where there weren't cracks before, and that's the wind shake. So I don't know. There's a lot there. Man, there's a lot of trees piled up, but I'm not going to go ask people if I could pull that tree out of their yard when they're missing half their house.
Right.
Yeah,
they have other things to worry about.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but.
So what are you working on then?
What am I working on? So I just wrapped up the watchmakers cabinet I've been talking about for the last couple of episodes. We just did finished photos on that yesterday. It's one of those things, we always say it on the show. We say it kind of facetiously, like, holy crap, it all worked out. Look what we put together. Like, how did this happen? This watchmaker's cabinet, I kind of feel like I'm very happy with how it turned out. Like, there's a couple of things I would have changed about it, or there's a couple of things that I wish I would have paid a little more attention to. But nothing super major. Design, I think proportions are exactly what they needed to be. I'm very happy with it. So, I'd be interested to see what people think about it. I know I posted a couple pictures on the Unplugged Facebook group, and you got a lot of response, so it'd be cool. So I didn't really have a plan on like where I'm gonna put this thing. Like it's all quarter sawn black walnut that I've had for a couple of years from my place, and like, God, this thing's pretty big. Like it would sit on my desk in my office maybe, but I kind of want it to hold my carving tools and stuff. So it needs to go in my shop. And I don't really have the counter space for it. And this weekend, like actually right before the tornado, I was working on I have a little cedar like hope chest that a family friend asked me to fix up, and I finally started doing it a year later. And it was sitting on top of this tool cabinet base that I started. Man, that's when we had the editor's shop across the street. So it's been 3 years probably, maybe longer.
Yeah,
and
probably.
I started building that, and I got the base cabinet done, and I just stopped. I didn't touch the drawers. I didn't touch the uppers. And looking at it, I'm like, holy crap, this cabinet is going to fit perfect on top of it. So it's going to be, maybe chest height. It's going to work out really nicely. Now that kind of gives me a little kick in the shorts to pick that project back up again and maybe make a few design changes, which is going to be interesting, trying to make some design changes after the carcass is already done. There's probably be some appliques and stuff, but I think it'll be cool. So
nice.
Yeah,
that'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm happy to have the watchmaker's cabinet done. So next issue is going to be a more simple project. It'll be a nice little. It's gonna be like a shaker side table, but Dylan just did that, so I'm trying not to call it shaker side table. I'm gonna do like a shaker plant stand, which is what it's gonna be. So
okay,
yeah. So that'll be cool.
So you're trying to do one project per issue then for Poplar?
No, I would like to do 0 projects per issue, but I would like to do one project per issue. Just the time associated with that is the hard part.
Yeah.
Trying to do that plus our filming plus working with other people doing, digital content, stuff like that's the hard part. So something small like the shaker side table, I could probably shoot that on photos in 2 days.
Yeah. So, cool. And then you got the shop starting pretty soon, right?
Yeah. That was before the tornadoes hit. So I had a local guy. I have a local guy, Austin, lined up to build the shop, which is he's gonna build the shell, the pole barn. I mean, 16-foot sidewalls. I don't want to mess with that.
Right.
I had him lined up, but I'm expecting, and rightfully so, that he will jump on helping some of the people that. I mean, there's I think within 2 miles of us, there's like 300 houses that are
damaged.
Yeah, they're not inhabitable currently.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing he'll probably jump on those. So I would really like to get a start on it early, or mid to late spring, if not early summer. But I would like to be in there full time by fall. So yeah, which is it's kind of fun. I'm going to plan a little bit of magazine content around some of that, because people always like to see the setting up shop type thing, and
right.
I think it's something everybody always dreams about, building their own standalone shop. And, I was talking to our building supervisor this morning about, I've always planned on putting a shop up at this place, even before I worked here. I mean, I always was going to put a shop up. So I had preemptively done some things in the house for, shared heating systems and stuff like that. So I think people always like to kind of think about, what would I do? What would I think about, and like to kind of hear about it and kind of daydream about it. So it'll be kind of fun to go through and kind of let people see what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and say, why are you doing that, dummy? So,
because it only fuels you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So, yeah, but no, it'll be fun. It'll be an interesting process. So,
John, do you have any workshop dreams now that we've gone through our first false spring?
Right. I'm not fooled by that. I'm not, I'm not out in the garage yet. I'm waiting. I'll wait. Yeah. I know it's going to be May before we get our last snow. So,
yeah.
But no, I haven't done much in my shop yet at home. I'm trying to get through spring break here. And then if it's still warm after that, I might start digging through the piles that I've left when we moved in. But still seems like it's down the road on that. But you were talking about small projects for Pop Wood. I kind of have that coming up for Woodsmith. I volunteered for next issue doing picture frames and a mason bee house, because it's like, I'll jump on the small projects. Those will be easy. But then you start getting into it. It's like, okay, this is a small project, but how do I make it more than a 2-page article? Like, how do I zhuzh this up? How do I church it up, enough to fill out some pages without making it super weird? So that's always the challenge, I guess, on the small projects, is adding enough detail to make it new and cool, but not overdoing it. So
that's the problem I have with some of the Pop Wood stuff, and that's one of the big fundamental differences for people that get Pop Wood and Woodsmith. They'll see the difference. Woodsmith does a lot of art. It's a lot of illustrations, a lot of dimensions. You can kind of see how the entire project's put together. Where Pop Wood, we do a lot of photos. So I always think, I can, 8 pages. How am I ever going to fill that out? And then I get done with the project. I'm like, I got 89 photos. I got to pick which steps I show and which steps I let people kind of, make up for themselves as they're reading. Right. So something like, you said, the picture frames, I could do a dozen photos on that without an issue. You know what I mean? But it's like, when you start squeezing that into artwork, it's like, it gets pretty small pretty quick.
Yeah.
So do you have mason bees all ready for props?
Yeah, I've been out catching them. Shoot? Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I have them on order. They'll show up in the warehouse.
Yeah.
Box just buzzing away.
People do that. You know that, right? Like, you order nukes.
Yep.
That's funny. I don't know if you can order mason bees, though.
I'm sure you can.
It feels like it. You just get them while they're dormant, so they're in their tubes already.
That's right.
Right. Yep.
Did your bees come out at all when it was warm last week?
Oh yeah. Yep. I have one hive at my house still that my buddy Vu is kind of managing, and both him and I we're talking about it. He lost all of his hives last year, so I was like, you know what, man? Why don't you just take these? To be honest with you, I don't have a ton of time, and this would take a little bit of burden off of me having to go in and check them and make sure I'm doing the responsible thing and make sure they're going to get through the winter. I was like, why don't you take them, replace your hives you lost. You're welcome to keep them here, but why don't you manage them? They're yours now. And he said, cool, I'm going to leave this small box here, a small hive, because they weren't terribly strong. The colony wasn't terribly strong in the fall or in the summer when we were doing all this. And we're kind of like, there's no way. Like, they're going to be dead. We're kind of sacrificing them to the apiary gods here. And it was before I went to Mexico. There was a warm day, and I walked over. I was working on getting trees down because the shop's going to go right next to where the bees are. And I'm like, I'm going to crack that lid and see what's in there. Because if it's empty, I'm just going to pull it down and, get everything out of there. And they were buzzing away. They were in there on their frames of honey. I'm like, there's only 2 boxes, and they're shallows. So they're like, there's not a lot, but there's bees in there, and they are sure they're sure happy. Once we're on first fall spring, once fourth fall spring is gone and stuff actually starts flowing, then I think they're going to be really buzzing. So
cool.
Yeah, tornadoes actually took out a bunch of hives. There was a call on the Des Moines Beekeepers of Iowa page, to go down to Winterset. There's a couple of big flower farms down there, I guess, that got hit pretty good. And I guess a lot of beekeepers had their hives down at the farms. Helps, it's kind of a symbiotic relationship there between the bees and the farm. But I guess the hives were just strung all over. So it's like you're trying, and if you know anything about bees, you can't put 2 queens together because one queen's going down, and the queens are kind of the generally you have your bees with their queen, and you don't mix and match. You don't mix bees with another queen because they'll kill her, and I don't even want to know how that started.
And you definitely can't bet on it.
No,
that's illegal. Bee fighting.
Yes.
Put little tiny spurs on them. No, don't.
There it is.
Can't wait for the comments on that.
Yeah. Well, this was my last podcast, so
Yep.
It's been fun, guys.
Phil, what do you have going on? I know you got some projects going on.
I have several.
Yes, you
I
do.
went through a part not that long ago where I felt like I was in a little bit of a lull or doldrums, and now all of a sudden I feel like I got like 6 or 7 things going on. But so I have the hand plane, which I don't know why. I think I talked about it last podcast or the podcast before that I had wanted to do that, and I'm still not entirely sure how I got myself into that one. But
It was the compelling Popwood article that did it.
Probably,
Yes.
yeah. Well, and it's based on that Cecil Pierce plane
Yep.
that you have
Yep.
that I've always admired, and I think it's probably the simplicity
Yeah.
of a wood-bodied hand plane and the lightweight, and for just what I wanted to use it for, just kind of general planing tasks rather than being a highly dialed-in smoothing plane or whatever. So I have that. I have a shrink box at home that I'm working on from the maple from the tree that came down in our yard. And finishing up, I kind of wrapped up a couple of them with those little boxes and a couple of video projects that I have going on. I have a video project on a toolbox, tool tote that we did. Have that one going. And I feel like I finally found my way on where my mortising jig is going to go.
Okay.
So I'm going to launch into that a little bit more, probably after spring break, just to get that project kind of wrapped up. Because I have kind of a little hoarded stash of Baltic birch plywood and hardboard runners and all that kind of stuff, and I want to get that cleaned up, and
Yeah.
we'll see.
You always know Phil's stash when it's like plywood parts just stacked in a pile. It's like, it's a mouse when it's like fluffy stuff. The plywood's Phil.
Yeah.
That's his nest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
edge glued.
It's it's all edge glued to make bigger panels.
I will say that this stuff is not edge glued, so
Okay.
Not
on this
yet.
particular version,
Oh,
I have not yet resorted to that. So,
funny.
but it's one of those things where it's like I know I'm going to use I need a bunch of little blocks and supports and
Yeah.
stops and stuff like that. So I don't need big sheets. So it's
Right.
perfect for all those little pieces that just kind of get used up or
Yeah.
thrown away or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't hoard that stuff right away, Chris will throw it in the garbage, and then you got to cut it.
And then it's gone forever.
Yep. Yep. You got to save them.
yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. That's funny.
So anyway, that's a few of the things that I have going on. I have been, I think probably because of our chat with Brent Hull last week, I've been kind of inspired to make a bookcase to hold all my woodworking books. Okay. And I've mentioned it a few years ago because I have the original or a full set of the printed versions of ShopNotes. So all 138 issues. And that's meaningful to me. So I wanted to find something that I could put those in. So I thought if I made a bookcase that collected some of those books and put them together, it's not going to be a huge thing, but just a nice looking home for it.
So what I was hoping you were going to go for was you were inspired by him to do something with like the huge moldings and some pilasters on it and stuff. That's where I was hoping you were going.
No, I mean, if you've seen some of his videos or his YouTube channel, he'll do a lot of stuff from his own home library, which has at least one wall just all decked out in bookcases, floor to ceiling built-in bookcases. And that's probably where I'm inspired. And his isn't, at least what I see on the videos, isn't super ornate. Yeah. But it's very traditionally inspired. And I don't know that I will go built-in on it, but something that has a nice classic look to it.
You did drop that word yesterday when you were looking at some plywood in the photo studio. You said, boy, if there was more than one of those, I'd bring that home for some built-ins in the basement.
Built-ins? Yeah, see, and that's the problem of doing that episode for the TV show on built-ins, because I don't know when it was. I think it was last summer. I had I think it was when we were planning out this season and we were talking about built-ins, and I was going around my house like, I would love to, because we have a 50s ranch, and right inside the front door is just some dumb single door closet that is barely accessible, and we put way too much stuff in it. And I saw in an old pattern book a version where instead of just having like a interior door, it was like 3 doors, and then instead of going all the way to the floor, was up on a pedestal a little bit, kinda, or you could put drawers underneath it, and then like each door would be its own compartment, and then you could get full access to the whole thing instead of like a center door and you have to kind of scramble around on the inside of it. And so there was like that one. I thought of doing built-ins underneath our stairs going into the basement where we store, like all the luggage and camping supplies and stuff like that. Because right now there's shelves under there from a previous owner, but it just it looks, and I get it, it's a basement, it's not a big deal. But I'm a woodworker, so I'm constantly thinking of places to make this better.
I was amazed when you uttered that word, because I hadn't heard you talk about built-ins before, and I'm like, Phil's gonna do some built-ins in his basement. He's gonna hate himself.
Yeah, no, I would love to, and I had even thought about doing. This is how far it went. Like it was a very virulent disease, because I had even sketched out in my little shop notebook about doing like in our basement storage room in the one corner, doing like a corner cabinet style, like an old school corner cabinet, but framing the interior with like foil faced insulation with the bare block wall on either side, so that I was essentially creating like a old school fruit cellar cabinet for like not cold storage but cool storage for stuff. It would totally not fly past the design committee at home, but sometimes the best woodworking is the woodworking you do in your head.
All my best woodworking is the woodworking I do in my head.
So it was that, and redoing my closet in our bedroom, and we have like a hallway closet, that you put like all the extra drugs and toilet paper rolls and all that kind of stuff. And again, it's just an interior door, and I thought it would be cool to have, like upper glass doors and replace, put drawers in at the bottom and maybe like a little counter surface and just dress it up.
If it was John saying this, I would say you'd be getting ready to move.
Right. Yeah.
That's right. That's when you get everything done. It's
Yeah.
when it's going to be for someone else.
Yeah. Nothing. There's no work like working against the wall.
That's right.
So anyway, there you go.
All right.
I think that wraps up another episode of the Shop Notes Podcast. Just a reminder, you can catch our show on the YouTubes as well as your local small batch seasonal podcastery. Don't forget to leave a rating and review there. It'll help us to get the Shop Notes Podcast in front of more people. Special thanks to Epilogue Laser, sponsors of this episode of the Shop Notes Podcast. You can quickly and easily customize your woodworking projects for added beauty and value. Learn more at epiloguelaser.com. If you have questions, comments, or smart remarks, I want to hear about them. Leave them in the comments section on our YouTube channel or send us an email, woodsmith@woodsmith.com. We'll see you next week, everybody. Bye.